Evening. How we doing? Karina is here. She doesn't get to do this very often, so she's really excited, so we have to be on our money tonight. Yeah. You took off today, right? Yeah, just for this. It's powerful. Awesome. So I have a really good friend of mine sitting here to my right. How many people know Gabriel Smoak? Look at those hands. Look at those hands going up. Yeah. You have a fan? You have a little fan club over there. Do you see that? Yeah. And that fan club doesn't want to hear me talk tonight.
Oh, okay.
Nope. That's what I heard. So tonight, this kind of births out of some discussions that Dawn and I and Gabriel and Sarah have had since they've come up here to visit. They've been up here since Monday. And the theme has kind of been on like the process or the struggle by which we come into a recognition or a revelation of who God is and who we are in Him. And I didn't know what else to name it because a lot of it came out of some of the things Gabriel was sharing with us. But so I named what we're going to kind of do tonight. It might not be an apt title by the time we're done, so I'm just warning you now. But right now, I feel like I wanted to kind of get across the idea that the struggle is not our identity. And the reason why I say that is because oftentimes, and I think we've talked about this here before, but I think it's worth talking about again, that sometimes we can be in a struggle or in a process for so long that that struggle or that process becomes who we think we are because we've been in it for so long. We begin to normalize what God doesn't want to normalize in our lives. And as we were talking, and as you really were talking, and I was just, being elated and things like that, I was realizing that you didn't let what you came through remain who you are. And I think that was Dawn's and my greatest joy and hope as we were listening to Gabriel talk. And, Sarah, it's so funny to watch Sarah. We'd be sitting across the table, and Sarah would look at Gabriel for a little while, and then she would just look at us just to see our response to Gabriel. I saw you doing it. Yeah. Because, nothing makes a wife happier than watching her own husband kind of come out of, a dark phase of his own life and really come into the light of who Jesus is and who you are in him. So tonight I was thinking about it all afternoon. I had to work, but I got to work pretty much by myself for a while. And as I was thinking about this, there aren't too many times in Scripture where I'm just laying a little bit of a foundation for this, where we hear a lot about some of our greatest heroes' struggles. Like, for example, you're not going to find anywhere in the New Testament where Jesus talks about what he experienced or went through on the cross. You don't see it. You see him talking a whole lot about what happened prior, what was going on in him prior. But afterwards, whether it's in Revelation or whether it's any of the writers of the New Testament epistles, they do not go into detail about what he experienced on the cross. And I think it's purposeful because the focus isn't to be on what the struggle was like. The focus is on what the struggle produced. And that's so much more important. So, I began thinking through some of these other guys, like, no one thinks of Joseph of the Old Testament as a prisoner. Anybody? But he went through the prison. In fact, the prison was the way by which he came in to royalty. And so most of us think of him as either a brother who was shunned or a prince in Egypt who eventually saved his entire family by being in the position and role that he was in. So we can go through all kinds of examples of that, but I'm becoming more aware in my own ministry and my own walk with the Lord of how imperative it is for me to not be so focused on what I'm going through. I really think that the Lord kind of takes us, even the writer of Hebrews, when he did talk about Jesus on the cross, he said for the joy set before him. So the one or the few times that we do actually see some mention of what Jesus might have been going through, it talks about what Jesus was looking at. So he was looking at what was coming out of what he was going through. And that's so important. I don't know about anybody else here, but maybe this is for someone listening, or maybe it's for someone else down the road that you're going to talk to. But hopefully tonight when you're done hearing Gabriel and whatever little bit I might add, that we see that what we experience and what we go through, especially the hard stuff, especially, I've seen all kinds of these sayings. Gabriel even put one up recently. If you really want to, bloom and be planted, you got to be willing to take all the crap that gets put on top of you to really grow all that. And that's great, but we oftentimes, if we're not careful, will identify with the crap instead of what the crap produces. So tonight, my hope in listening here tonight is that we see through the cross. We see through the struggle. We see through the process, because I've hung out with enough people who have made their struggle their identity. And then what happens is when they begin to experience some breakthrough, they actually think something's wrong. And they'll recreate without realizing it. They'll self-sabotage to come back into struggle because that's become normal for them. And so far, so good with what I'm seeing with you. So I'm going to hand this over to you, and you just start sharing. And I don't even know if you'll let me break in because you tend to talk.
Well, you have to keep me in check. Yeah. All right. So I guess before I just go into what I was telling you, I'll give a little bit of background for people who don't know me about myself. Since Mark knows, I didn't have to go into backstory, but me and Sarah dated for several years before we got married. We've been married now for almost 8 years. And so we've been together probably 15 years as a couple. But when we got together, we were both two very different people. I grew up in church. My parents were and still are very devout Christians. I was that kid in school. I was the Jesus freak. I was the guy who carried the Bible to every class. I led prayer at See You at the Pole rallies. I got my first paycheck when I was 14 for speaking at an AME church. I mean, that was me. I went to church 6 days a week and twice on Sundays. That was my identity. That's who I knew myself to be. But the summer of my senior year of high school, my brother died. And it was sudden, and it was unexpected. He had a dissecting aortic aneurysm, which is a tear in the aorta, and once it bursts, there's really not anything you do. And the night he died, my mother woke me up, and she said, look, he's going to the hospital. The ambulance is coming. I'm following in your car. I need you to pray. And so I prayed. And I grew up believing the literal word of the Bible. So I quoted all the healing scriptures. 1 Peter 2:24. And in Isaiah, I quoted, by his stripes we are healed. I believed this with all my heart. If faith could move a mountain, then I had faith that night. And my brother still died. And that was a bitter pill for me to swallow, because up to that point, I had a pretty privileged life. I mean, I didn't really have many struggles until that point. And I watched how my family reacted, because my family is the one that taught me to, speak things that are not as though they are, and to believe with faith, and you can move mountains. And they took comfort in the scripture in Isaiah that says God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. But to me, that was a cop-out. Because if God's just going to do what God wants to do, what does it matter if I believe? What does it matter if I pray? What does any of it matter if God's going to do what he wants to do? That led down to a disillusioned Christianity, to agnostic, to atheist, to very militant atheist. By the time me and Sarah got together, I hated all things Christianity, all things religion, all things God. And Sarah was not a Christian at the time, so that was fine. But eventually, she did become a Christian, and she got saved, and she gave her life to Jesus. And from that point on, it was brutal between us. So I set that stage to say that before we got married, Sarah came to my house where I was living at the time. And in all sincerity, in all innocence, she told me, this is my life. I have a call on me. I want to serve God. I want to go overseas. I want to be whoever and whatever he wants me to be. And I need to know, are you with me? Because I can't bind myself to you if I know we're pulling two different directions. And I looked at her, and those beautiful blue eyes, and the love of my life, and I knew I couldn't lose her. So I lied. Straight through my teeth, I lied. Because I could not live without her. Fast forward to years later, and my marriage is in shambles. And our relationship feels like it's broken beyond all hope. And I cried. And I begged God to forgive me. And I thought back to that night, and I said, God, if I could go back, I would tell the truth. If I could go back to that moment, I would let her go. Because if I'm convinced and insistent upon being miserable for my whole life, that's one thing. But there's no reason for me to drag her down into this hell. Fast forward a little while later to now. And I realized God has not only forgiven me, He's not only redeemed me, He's actually redeemed the lie. He's turned that lie into truth. He's taken the things I said then, and He's made them a reality now. And I'm able to talk about some of my struggles, some of my flaws. We just sat down for dinner a while back with a couple from my local hometown and two 20-year-old kids. And I start telling them a little bit about myself, and this guy doesn't know me, and I don't know him. But as I'm talking, this guy's eyes are just lighting up, you know? And I realize I'm connecting with this guy in a way that I don't really know how it's working. And I'm just telling him about what I went through and my doubts and my frustrations and how I discovered who God really was. And he begins to open up. And he tells me how his parents are verbally abusive and how he sits in his truck before he goes inside and just cries some nights because he can't handle this, right? And I realize that something powerful is happening between us, right? I realize that the things that used to hold me back, the things in my life that always kept me from being who I wanted to be, has now become a weapon for me. It's now my greatest ally. That thorn in my flesh it's now become a sword on my hip. It's something I wield with power and with confidence now. You know, and that SOS that we had helped me a lot because, again, you don't know, but I'm a very private individual. I don't like people to know my business. I keep a lot of things inside, but I realize that is death to me. That everything I keep in the secret and in the dark and hidden is the very things that if I shine light on it will bring life all around me. And just like a fungus, like a mushrooms that grow in the dark, damp places, that's what this place did to me. Just that one little corner of my soul that I wouldn't let anybody into, that I wouldn't let anybody see, infested every other part of me. So, that being said, while you were talking, and it just come to my mind, I don't know if anybody's ever read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. Anybody? This guy, awesome. So, in The Great Divorce, it's kind of a story about, basically this guy is watching other people try to get to heaven, long story short. Well, there's this one guy that comes up, and he has this creature on his shoulder. And he's trying to get into heaven, and the angel stops him, and he says, "You're not going to get very far with that thing." And the guy's like, "Oh, I know, tell me about it. This thing has been weighing me down my whole life. You know, it's been around me all the time, and I wish I could get rid of it, but it's just a part of me. What can you do?" You know, and the angel asked him, "Do you want me to get rid of it for you?" He's like, "Man, I wish you could." So the angel pulled out a sword. The guy's like, whoa, wait a minute. I don't want any part of that. He said, "Don't you want to be rid of it?" He said, "Yeah, but I didn't say anything about killing it. You know, I'll keep it under control. I'll keep it quiet. I'll keep it maintained. You know, you don't need to do that." Eventually, the guy relents, and he lets the angel strike it down. So as he strikes it down, this thing is writhing on the ground, but it begins to grow, and it begins to transform, and it turns into this beautiful white stallion. And as it transformed, the man becomes alive again. That thing that was sucking all the life out of him, he becomes young and youthful and vibrant again. And now that creature that was holding him back becomes his steed that he takes to ride up the mountain. I told another story to Mark about when I first graduated school. I worked for a while as a plumber's assistant. And I was underneath this cabinet one day, and I was struggling to cut this pipe with a hacksaw blade. I mean, I was just pouring down sweat, and I was giving it all I had. I really was. And I was just struggling, but this thing would not budge. It would not cut. Finally, Jamie, the guy I was working with, took pity on me, and he came, and he took the hacksaw blade out of my hand, turned it around, and handed it back to me. Cut like a knife through butter. I had it backwards. But as I thought about that, I realized that's a pretty good analogy of my whole life. The positions we give things has a lot of effect of how well we use them. See, these parts of my life that I wanted to get rid of, they're still there, but they're in a different position. Does that make sense? They're not in a position where they have power over me. They're in a position where I can wield them. I can use them to tell others and say, hey, I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like to be angry, to be frustrated. I know what it's like to feel like a failure. I know what it's like to be clinically depressed. I know what it's like to be suicidal and wish you were dead every day of your life. I've been there. I've done that. But I'm not anymore. And I can tell you why. And for the first time in my life, I feel people connect to that. I feel people respond to that because, my whole life has been hidden. So I've lived vicariously through great writers, and I've quoted quotes, and I've been witty and quippy. But this is the first time I've ever been honest, and I've ever been real, and I've ever been authentic. And I can tell you, and you guys probably know it because, Mark does a great job of this, but in my hometown, that's sorely lacking. People respond to authenticity in a way that blows my mind. I will sit with somebody and not have anything important to say, just being genuine, being real, and letting them see me for all the ugliness or beauty that is, right? Just being myself fully and engaging them in a way that is wide open. And people respond to that. They flock to our house, man. We can't keep them out. They come to our house and stay till past midnight, and we're like, you got to go. I got to work in the morning, right? And we don't have anything important to say to them. We're just us. People come to us for marriage advice. To us. People who struggled out of 7 out of 8 years, we barely made it. And people are coming to us for advice. You know how humbling that is? So that's really all I was telling Mark, is just my story, where I'm at now, where I've come from, and how God has taken this part of my life that I just wanted to bury. I just wanted to put behind me, throw dirt over it, put it 6 feet under, and forget about it. And he refused to let that happen. He's taken that and he's turned it into a way to connect with people that I never thought was possible. For a long time, I thought that if people really knew me, if they really knew the inside of me, if they really knew who I was, I would lose any chance at all for their respect. And what I realize now is that people respect me more now than ever, that they really see me, that they really know me. And now that my struggle isn't who I am anymore. The struggle doesn't define me, but it's part of my story. And I'm not ashamed of it. And there are parts that I ought to be ashamed of, but God's taken that. Another thing C.S. Lewis said is that shame is a funny thing. It's like hot coffee. If you spill it on you, it'll burn. But if you drink it, it'll warm you all the way down. And I have drank this part of my life, and I have let it become part of me. And it's taken the sting out of it. Mark, I don't know what else to say.
There's going to be more you say. I know you are. I was thinking as you were sharing there about the picture that Revelations gives us of Jesus when the angel says, here comes the Lion of Judah, right? You remember that part? And those of you that remember it, what they actually see is not a lion. You guys remember what they see? It says there's a lamb sitting on the throne. But everyone's shouting out, there it is. There he is, the Lion of Judah. But everyone sees a lamb. And it's not just a lamb, but it's a lamb slain. Which means, I don't know if you've ever seen an animal after it has been butchered, but prior to it being, killed, but prior to it being butchered, but it doesn't look pretty. And so obviously the sight of Jesus is the sight of his wounding, is the sight of his torment, his torture, and even his death. Yet his name is Lion. His name, if you all go throughout the rest of the book of Revelation, he's the Word of God. He's the righteous one, the holy one, all these things. It's like they see the wounds and they see the scars and they see where he bled, but they don't identify him that way. And so as I was hearing you talk, it's like what used to be like, you were talking about militant atheist, that, you eventually got to that place. And I think I met you right around the militant phase. And you were interesting to be around during that phase, because, he comes as a militant atheist to koinonia. That's a really strange combination to take place. And did you come up one time before that?
Yes.
Yeah, you came up one time before that. And I remember sitting at Fudd's with you and Darren, and we were just talking, and you could tell that everything was still in you. You could even hear the Lord talking in you. But for you, it was just knowledge. It was just like you said, it was quippy, it was rhetoric. Right. It was just repetitive, robotic. This is what you're supposed to say to a guy who's in ministry or a Christian. It's like you almost knew what to say and when to say it. But I heard more. But because you were not thinking of yourself as anything but what you currently were and what you had went through, I remember you saying very clear to me sitting across that round table, there is no way I can believe in this God that I prayed to and he didn't answer. I remember you saying that about your brother and that circumstance you went through. So, and I don't know what, this is what I wouldn't mind these people hearing a little bit more about it. If you don't elaborate, it's fine. But what was that process from? I don't know when it was for you, and I'm not going to try to label or name those times for you, but you don't even have to say times as much as what was the process by which you began to see the light again, and feel it rise up on the inside of you. I think that would be good for all of us, because whether none of us are in the midst of it right now, we will eventually get into that place where we are looking for hope and looking for light. Yeah. So could you kind of help?
So I'll give you the shortest version I can do, because I can ramble on. But so I'll never forget the moment that the sun just began to break a little bit. And I think it might be the most unique story. I think I might be the only one in the universe to be able to say this. I might have been converted from atheism to theism by Bill Maher. You know who Bill Maher is? Because I was actually watching, I remember this, and this, again, me and Sarah could not have been more distant from each other. She's in the bed sleep, and I'm sitting on the couch watching Real Time with Bill Maher. And he makes some joke about religion, as he is apt to do. And I laugh, and he laughs, and the audience laughs. But somehow in that moment, and other than God, I don't know who to credit to, something about the way he said it, something behind his eyes, something in that was not right. And the thought crossed my mind, this guy is miserable. Now, I'm not saying he's miserable. I don't know Bill Maher. I'm not saying atheists in general are unhappy people. I don't know that to be true. But something about what he said and how he said it was like a mirror. And I saw myself. And I saw how wretchedly miserable I was. And I thought about Sarah. And I thought about my family. And I thought about her friends. And I thought, those idiots, they're so stupidly happy. They're wrong about everything, but God, they're happy, And then I thought, if this is it, if this is really all life is, if life is just mere existence, then why go through it miserable? Why not believe a lie? Why not believe a lie and be happy? What's the point? There's nothing after it anyway, And from that moment, and there was no prayer, there was no heart, there was just this strong desire to be happy. I remember my whole thought, like a wildfire, just things inside began to change little by little. And this is a process that took years. So don't think this was overnight. But I remember being clearly, I work at a paper mill. And at that time, part of my job was loading chemicals in rail cars. And I was on the graveyard shift, so I was at night. And I was standing on top. And one of the knocks I always had against Sarah is that she lived with her head in the clouds somewhere. She didn't care about real life. She was always somewhere else, and she didn't care about what's right in front of her, And I'm sitting, and I'm standing on top of this rail car, and I'm looking up at the stars, and that feeling you get sometimes, and that just, when you look up at the stars and you think, wow, what a big universe, and what a small me, And so I'm looking up at the stars, and for the first time, I'm thinking, this is real life? Like, all of that. And this is what's real. Me loading chemicals into a truck for tiny green strips of paper. This is what it's all about. For the first time, I began to question what constitutes real and what is meant by life, you know? And so from then, and it was still because I'm so prideful and because I'm so shameful, I couldn't bring this to Sarah. I couldn't bring this to any of her friends. I couldn't bring it to my parents. I had to figure it out for myself because, you know, I just had to do it. And so I discovered, and again, this is a God thing. I discovered C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton and George MacDonald, and they fed in me they were an oasis in a desert for me. And to this day, that's one of my flaws, and Sarah has to remind me of that because I have leaned so strongly on them for my faith, for my hunger, that I have forgotten how to interact with real living people, you know? And I have sort of weighed everything I said. They have become my fathers, if you have, you know, if, you know, you talk about spiritual fathers. My spiritual fathers are C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, and George MacDonald. I've read everything they wrote. I can quote them like the back of my hand because when I needed it, they were there for me. And I could go in details about that. I won't bore you, but I can still remember, and now I'm boring you. I can still remember reading A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. And I don't know if anybody's ever read that, but that's a journal he kept when his wife died. And it was a journal he kept sort of to note his grief. Well, there's a part in that book that, and see, my family, we're not a very expressive family in a lot of ways. So, you know, my parents weren't very expressive about their grief like I was. So I felt like nobody understood, like nobody was mad at God but me. And I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand how everybody was okay with God in my family but me. And like, how am I the only one that realized it's God's fault that Craig died? You can blame anybody else you want, but it's his fault ultimately, you know? I'm reading this book, and he talks about God, and he says, you know, isn't it weird? He said, where is God in all this? He said, why is it that when you don't really need him, when you could probably do without him, when you might even feel like his presence on you might be an encumbrance, that if you ask for him, he's everywhere. But when you really need him, when you're desperate and when no one else would do, you find a door slammed in your face and it bolted and locked from the inside. He said, why is God always there when you don't need him, but so absent in your moment of need? And I remember when I read that, I was at the E-line at work, which is this private place where you're all by yourself, and I wept. Not because I was sad, because I was so happy that someone understood. Somebody understood what I was going through. I was not, and because he understood, that gave him a power over me that nobody else had at that moment. Because he understood, I was able to take advice from him. Because everybody else said, I know what you're going through, and I wanted to say, blankety blank, you don't know what I'm going through, you know? Anyway, but then a lot of that was still up here, man. It was so much up here, you know? Up here, down here never really got touched. And again, not to pat anybody on the back, but it never really began to change until that koinonia I had. And I don't know if you guys remember, I had to get up and grab the microphone and talk about an elephant. I don't know if you guys remember that. Weird. But that moment, I felt something for the first time. And since I can recall, it quit being an intellectual belief and started being a fundamental belief. That I actually felt something. Now, of course, as soon as I got home, I wanted to deny I felt it. I wanted to pretend like it didn't happen. But it did happen, and I knew that. And then again, it wasn't until years and probably a couple years after that that I knew that there was something in my life, there were parts of me that I kept hidden that were going to be the end of me. And if it wasn't revealed eventually, I would never be who I wanted to be. One day I got the courage to rip myself wide open, reveal everything about me, and it cost a lot. Without going into detail, it cost a lot. It almost cost me everything. But the moment I did it, I felt that weight lifted from me. And I said, I'm free. Whatever happens after this, I'm done. And God has been faithful in that. And he's taken me to places I never thought I could be. And look, I'm sitting here. This is not something I do, guys. Like, you don't know me. Mark knows. This is not something I do. I don't get a microphone and talk to people. That's not me. But here I am. Because I believe that God, I believe the Bible when it says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. I believe that what we say has power. And just like C.S. Lewis, he understood what I went through, and that gave him power so many times. I am not as special as I think I am. I talk to people and I realize, wait a minute, you feel like that? You have dealt with this too? I'm not the only one in the universe. Special me is not the only person since mankind existed that has ever felt like this. Surprise. But we keep this part of us hidden. We're ashamed of it. And so we hold back, but no more of that. No more, because if anybody feels like I felt, and all you need is to feel not alone in this vast universe, then I'm going to give you everything I got. And I'm sorry, I kind of got off topic there about how I became. It's such a long story, and I'll tell you as much as you want to know, but I'm trying to keep it under wraps a little bit. But yeah, that Koinonia and SOS, all of that helped me so much, because I realized that I cannot be, I'm trying not to speak generalities, I cannot be healthy and hidden at the same time. I can't do that. So.
That's a really important statement. I hope you caught that. Being healthy and hidden are not good. They don't live together. I remember being in SOS with Gabriel, and as he was talking about how just knowing someone has experienced or felt what you felt, and I don't know if anybody in the room at SOS actually was able to truly empathize with you, but we were willing to feel what you felt. And that's what makes Jesus such, I want to use the word compassionate, but it doesn't feel strong enough. But it's what makes Jesus such a great Savior, is that he didn't just ride in on a white steed and die. He literally wanted to experience the fullness of what it was like to be human. He spent 33 years in the same flesh that we all did, and then suffered. I'd like to say that I think he spent 33 years suffering. For him to leave what he had, Philippians says he emptied himself. Literally it means he took off and removed from the inside of him everything that made him worthy of everything, bowing and worshiping. And he emptied himself and became like us. And in that moment, that's when he becomes qualified for us. And so as you're talking about sitting with these guys across the table, sharing your heart and they're like, it's like their eyes are brightening as you're sharing where you were. It's not where you are. Right. You don't have to share, this is where I am right now, to connect. That's the beauty of it. Jesus is he's no longer this human suffering in all the temptations we experience, yet he's still fully compassionate, still fully an intercessor and available to us. And that's what I think so beautiful, is that you don't have to continue to struggle and be in those places to still connect with people that are. That is so important. And so as I'm listening to him talk, as I was listening to him on Monday, as I've experienced you over the last couple of years, I feel like I've witnessed a true testimony. You used that verse, and I was going to use it a little bit later on so we can talk about it now, that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. And what I like about that is the testimony is a past event. And in some cases, it's a past us. Now, what I think is really important is that we have to realize, and I think we've talked about this here before, that our testimony can't just be what went wrong. It can't just be what sucked. And I think many of us Christians tend to idolize what went wrong in our lives and then talk about what Jesus saved us from. The reality of this testimony is who Jesus was to us in the midst of it. And please understand that. That's what I think is so faithful about you, is that at least in the last 3 years or so that I've known you, I've been able to watch who he is, even when you weren't sure who he was. So I don't know if you've been around people who would say God isn't real or who would say that they don't believe, but when you're talking to them, you can hear the Lord. Have you ever been around people like that? Where they're like, you're denying the person that's speaking. Because you can hear his heart. You can see the light of the Lord in their eyes. You can see them in one moment say they don't believe and then love just like him. And that's what this guy was like. And Sarah, I know, could stand up here and testify to this, that even though she experienced this militant atheist, she can also say that she experienced the love of Jesus in the midst of that. And that's because so many of us, we can deny him even in the midst of our deepest, darkest. And that's why I named the Bible study tonight what I did, because we can be so caught up in the darkness and not realize that he's right there with us, sustaining and making us the light in the midst of it. I used to tell my kids all this time, like Anderson would be so scared going up the stairs in the dark. And I would say, don't worry about it. He goes, I know, Dad, because I'm the light. I know. Like he would get tired of it because I would say that over and over again. But it's the truth. And now he recognizes that darkness doesn't define us. So when Jesus goes out into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, the wilderness doesn't define him. His hunger doesn't define him. If either one of those things define him, he would have fell to the temptation. And that's such an important thing for us, guys. Don't let the circumstances of the struggle define you. Don't let them turn you, and then when, I know this is going to sound a little overly simplistic, but when the enemy offers you bread, take it. This is really important for us to understand. No, I mean, unless you completely shut down, which I have heard people say that you're no longer hungry after 40 days. I can tell you right now, I would be famished. He's offered food. And in fact, here's the thing. He's reminded that he can turn stones into bread. That's even more important. The enemy is reminding Jesus of his identity in the midst of the struggle. He's actually using his identity to tempt him out of it. Do you guys hear that? I hope you hear the value in that, because, I'm thinking about you in high school. And I remember you telling me about how you were the guy. Everybody knew. You were quoting scripture didn't you carry a Bible all the time with you in high school and all that? He was known as like the preacher boy, right? That was him. All through school, everybody knew this guy. This was the guy that was the preacher guy. And so you go through this dark season of your life, and it could have easily been, hey, let's minister. Let's bring back preacher boy. Let's get him back into the pulpits, and let's get him out in the streets evangelizing again. And let's him do it. And if we're not, I'm just thinking about this as we talk, and so maybe you can even help me with this. I wonder if you would have met, and this is going to sound a little harsh, so I'm just going to say it, but if you would have met Church of God, Pentecostal, what was your background? Pentecostal. Okay, Pentecostal. Okay. So if you would have met Pentecostal people, and they would have pushed all the right buttons and tickled all the right spots in you, if they could have stirred that thing back up in you, or was the struggle to really kill a lot of that religiosity that you were walking in? Can you speak to that? Would you? Because you didn't meet that. You met weirdos like us. Right?
That's true.
So I'm just curious if there would have been a process and that would have been different.
Well, my family is that Pentecostal sort of thing. And I found that one of their greatest, we grew up, the Pentecostal, I don't know how, again, I'm trying not to generalize. Down south, Pentecostal has a certain flavor, we went to revivals, and it was a lot like Brownsville revival and stuff like that, and you laid on the hands and people were healed and all this kind of stuff. So that was a big claim. And I did have people tell me, but when they softened their stance after my brother died, when the same people who told me that you just have to believe and God still performs miracle and he's the same today as he was yesterday, and I said, what about this? And they said, well, you just have to trust that God's going to do the right thing. That's what always pushed me away further. I would tell them, you are a sucker. You know what I mean? Because I guess what it is that was my identity. And to me, there was such shame in that. A shame of being suckered, of being fooled, of being duped. Like, you idiot. You fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. That I was so repellent to anything like that. To anything. I mean, you can ask Sarah. If there was Benny Hinn on TV, boy, my mouth was, how dare him? How dare him manipulate and take advantage? You know he can't do a blankety-blank thing about a blankety-blank thing. How dare him manipulate these people who are desperate and in need for something, just want to believe anything. And he just, because anybody who claimed to be able to do that was a liar and a fraud. I didn't need to know background. I didn't need to know anything. I didn't need to know their bank account. I didn't know anything. If you offered hope to the hopeless, you were a liar, because there is no hope for the hopeless. And that pushed me further and further away. So these people you're talking about, and again, now I think the people who could have pushed my buttons were liberal theologians. Theologians that say, and I don't know how much you know about liberal theologians, people that say, these are all allegories. That Christ never raised from the dead. He's alive in spirit, and he's alive in us. Those are the people that could have pushed my buttons. The people who said there is no miracle, there is no faith needed. This almost this inner light sort of thing. You know what I mean? Which is really, from what I understand, the complete opposite of the Bible. That we definitely need something outside of us. That the answer is not inner, it's outer. But that's who could have pushed my buttons. Is those people, and luckily I didn't have any of those in my life, but those were the people that if anybody could have made me into that preacher man again, it would have been a 180 version of what I was before. But I did want to say one thing, what you were talking about, because it reminded me, and I told Sarah on the ride up here, there was a revelation I got that when I got it, it just leveled me. And you were talking about how Christ became one of us, and he suffered for us. And it was actually, I read it in a G.K. Chesterton book, but when I grasped that revelation, it really rocked my world. And it was talking about his statement on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? And he said, you can look through all the gods in the universe. Let every man promote his own God and tell me, find me a God that forsook himself. Find me one person who claims that for the awfulest instant, their God became an atheist. And that rocked my world, that I thought, did he do that for me? Did he need to know what it was like to be forsaken by God because I was going to feel like I was forsaken by God? And then that power that I gave to Lewis and everybody else, I gave to Jesus at that time, because he understood. He felt like God abandoned him. God felt like he abandoned himself. I mean, it gets too crazy for words, really, but that leveled me at that moment when I really grasped that revelation, that God honestly knows. Like, because this is the only, and again, this is the only, from everything I know, this is the only God that can add to his attributes courage. Every other God doesn't need courage. He's all powerful. He's omnipotent. But courage is only courage if it meets its breaking point and does not break, right? This is the only God that I know of, and I've looked at a lot of other ones, that can honestly claim the attribute of courage, of knowing what it's like to feel like the whole world is against you, and still standing strong. So I just wanted to touch on that, because that really, when you talked about how Jesus did suffer those things for us, became because he wanted to understand what it was like to be us, so that he could fully say, I know what you're going through, in a way that was meaningful. you know, went back to that. So,
As you were talking about that, I'm wondering, is like the thing that I feel like is the most different about your walk prior to that season of time and your walk now is the idea of authenticity. Like that's the thing you constantly bring up now, is that you love not only feeling and getting to be the real you, but watching it bring light and release other people too. And I think that that particular time where Jesus says, "Why have you forsaken me?" And the other time where he prays, "If you could take this cup from me, could you please do that?" I mean, in both those cases, I think God becomes as real as any God could be. I mean, this is a God who's struggling. This is a God who's not sure he wants to go through what he needs to go through. He feels alone. I don't think the reality is that he was alone, but it doesn't matter. He felt alone. He knows thank you. He knows what it feels like to be in that dark place and to feel like he has been forsaken. And I think it's why he promises, "I will never forsake you, because I know what it feels like and I won't let it happen to you." And so, just as I listen to your story again afresh, I wonder if the greatest difference and the reason why it's so engaging to not only you but to others around you now is that, and I want to ask you this, how real was your walk with the living person of God prior versus now? Did you feel like you could be real? Did you feel like you could share your faults and share your struggles before versus like you're very free to do so now? Is there a difference for you, and what does that feel like?
sure. Yeah, so I definitely think there was a difference. Well, I'll say this. Prior to this, I think was as real as could be in the situation that it was, that I didn't choose this. That this was sort of I inherited it. This is all I knew. Does that make sense? So I was taught this from a young age. I didn't know any different, right? So I believed what I was taught, and I believed it with all my heart to that sense. Now, how real can anything be if, and this is going back to something else I read on Grief Observed, that I realized I can't point the finger everywhere else, is something he said about why does it have this effect on me? I was promised trials and tribulations. That was part of the package. I signed up for it. And yet when it happened, I act like I should be immune to it, right? And he said, if my whole house collapsed with one blow, then it was a house of cards. And the sooner it collapsed, the better. The sooner I can start rebuilding. No, but the thing is, there were definite real things back then. And here's part of my struggle till today. And Sarah knows about it. Here's something I still deal with. There were things on the spiritual side, things that I defined myself so much spiritually then. There was not a lot of intellectual theology back then. It was all spirit, all emotion, all feelings back then. To the point that now I am so gun shy of that side of Christianity that it is a hindrance to me. And that's something I'm constantly fighting against. And I tell Sarah, we have to pray, you have to pray for me, because if I go to somebody and they say, "Pray for me to be healed," I go, God, have your way. Because, I'm so gun shy of that. I will say that was, is it possible to be real and not authentic at the same time? It was real in the sense that it was all I knew, but when I had to choose, when I hit a breaking point, I broke. So it wasn't real enough to sustain me through the dark times. And now, again, I can't read the future, and I'm not arrogant enough to say that it's all sunshines and giggles from here. But I feel like now my faith in God is such that it's not consequential. That I don't look at the outcome of every event in my life and judge his existence or his goodness by that particular event. That there is a bigger game afoot. And because of that, I feel, and again, I love, like my parents, my family, my church I grew up in, they were very If you were sick, you didn't say you're sick. You say, I'm healed, thank God. You know what I mean? In that sense, I consider that completely inauthentic. You know what I mean? Like in the sense that, hey, here's what I'm going through, and I need to talk about it with somebody. And there is a value to that, I believe. I believe there is a stoicism to it. There is this sort of thing that, you pull your chin up and you just take the punches as they come and you don't complain about it. And I think there is some value to that. But I also think, especially with the younger generation that I encounter in my small group, is that they want authenticity. They want you to say what's happening, and it doesn't matter if it's happening according to script. They want to know what's happening. Does that make sense? Yeah. That sense, I'm very much more authentic now than I was before. Because even when you knew me back then, I wasn't authentic like that. I would tell you, here's what I believe, but it was very scripted and it was very measured. I would tell you things that did not risk me in very many ways. I was very measured with the things I would say, not just to you, to Sarah, to anybody. I would make sure I would tell you enough to give you an overall picture, but not enough to puncture anything, Enough to keep my walls up, keep you at arm's length, make sure nobody could get close enough to really see the parts of me I didn't want you to see. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. And maybe there are. I don't know that there are any parts of me now that I don't want anybody to see. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I'm not.
What do you think the difference is there? Why now are you able to do that when you couldn't before? What do you think it is?
I'm trying to think of like a poetic way to say this. It's like imagine a caterpillar, okay? And he's lived his whole life, and he's going through things, and he feels this thing inside of him, and he doesn't know what it is, so he keeps it hidden, right? Then one day he gets in his cocoon, and that thing that was inside of him turns out to be wings, and it sprouts. After the cocoon, he's not ashamed of it anymore. He doesn't want it to keep hidden because by that, he's able to fly. And that's how I feel. I realize when I release this part inside of me, if nothing else happens from this, if there's not one person that I affect in a positive way, if my life doesn't change in any measurable way, my relationship with my wife is enough for me to say, I will never go back. We are closer now than we have ever been. 15 years of being together, we are closer now. We have almost a telepathic link to each other now that we've never had before. Because for the first time, she sees every part of me, wide open. And once you taste that, how can you go back? Like, how can you? I wish I could say it in a way that didn't sound so condescending, and I'm sorry if it does sound condescending, but if you've struggled for that, and if you've let that go, and if you've let people inside, and if you've let them see you, and if you have realized that they saw you and they still love you, you never want to be not seen again.
So true.
I don't know what else. I'm sorry, man.
Sarah, do you want to add anything to this? Oh, are you sure? Okay. So I've been wanting to ask you this question all day, and I'm almost afraid to ask it. But, and then I want to open this up, see if anybody else, do you have something you want to say? You sure? Okay, I just want to ask you this one question. So, what happens if another brother dies now? What happens to Gabriel?
I'm scared to say anything because it's so easy on this side of that question, right? It's so easy to say, well, here's what I believe and here's what I do before that ball drops. The truth is, there are I realized that my brother's death hit me hard because a lot of that was selfishness, right? And this is not, if you lost somebody, if anything I say offends you, I apologize. And look, my brother suffered when he died. That was hard for me to take. I mean, he barely made it in my mom's room saying he couldn't breathe. The doctors didn't know what was going on. They gave him CPR, made him die quicker. It pumped more blood into him. I mean, he suffocated. He suffered. But his loss was the pain I felt. My atheism stemmed not because my brother suffered, but because I did. I am not saying anybody else feels that way. If you've lost somebody, I am not putting you in that boat. I'll admit to what I am and to what I did, but my doubt came from my individual pain, not from my brother's. And I think, again, it's so easy to say on this side of it. I trust God with everyone's life. The hardest person's life to trust him with is my own. And I truly believe, and God, search my heart and tell me if I'm telling the truth, that I believe God's goodness is not measured by any particular event. I believe to separate God from his goodness is to separate the oxygen from the air. It's one and the same. And like I said before, that there is a bigger game afoot. There are pieces to this puzzle that I simply can't see. And how everything goes full circle. And I have become one of those people I mocked and said that God's ways are higher than our ways and his thoughts are higher than ours is ironic. That I'm now up here saying that. The same people who, if you're in that, I don't know if there's any scripture less frustrating or, less comforting than that scripture. When you are going through something, you don't want to hear that, and I know it. But for the man and woman who can actually believe that and actually believe that God is good, not because X, Y, and Z, but because God is good. And one thing that's happened from my prior faith is I used to look at this as a contract, right? This was a legal document that bound me and him together, right? And I no longer do that. This is evidence of his goodness, but he is bigger than this to me now. He does not exist inside this book. He is good whether or not I ever read one of these pages, whether I ever believe one of these pages, whether everything comes true, whether nothing comes true. He is good because he is good. He is good because I realized that what I called life was mere existence, right? And that there are people who have died and who are more alive than ever. And that there are people who are alive now who have been dead for years. And if you're only judging by the lungs in your air and by the blood pumping in your heart, by the neurons firing in your brain, you will miss the whole point of everything. And I did miss that for a long time. But I finally got to the point where I want more than existence. I want more than those things. I want something on the other side. I want someone on the other side. And that was a big difference for me, a really big difference. Before my Christianity, and I quoted the scripture a lot that, the only way to heaven is through Jesus. That's not actually what the Bible says. The Bible says the only way is through the Father is through me. See, my goal was different then. Jesus was a means to an end, if that makes sense. I wanted to go to heaven. I wanted to go to paradise. I wanted to have streets of gold, and I wanted to go to, exactly, right? My aim wasn't God himself, and now it is. Mark, I don't know what will happen if someone close to me dies. But here's what I know. I know that I have you, and I have my wife, and I have my family, and I know I know that I have experienced what it's like to go through something alone and what it's like to go through something with others. And I don't think I'm foolish enough to try the first tactic again. Because life is hard, but it's unbearably hard when you face it alone. And I don't think I could ever go back to facing it alone. And I think that in itself will be enough to get you through.
I was just gonna say, like, kind of hearing like what your previous beliefs were, and like just looking back, kind of thing. Like, I think that throughout that time, or the period that you were saying you were like a combative atheist and all that kind of stuff, like, just from my perspective and hearing it, like, I feel like the Lord still had a draw on you, and that through that dark time and through that stuff and everything that happened, I think he just sort of used it as a time to just knock off the stuff that didn't need to be there, kind of like that surfacey, like, kind of you said, like the rhetoric, repeating stuff, and just all that head knowledge. But there was something still there, because you still felt a draw. Maybe if it was even years later, there was something there. So, and what you got through that, was this experience of life. And to say that, you came out of that, it just made you that much stronger. If you had stayed in that place where you were in and you didn't hit a dark time, you probably would be in the same place. Like, you still would have been the guy that just, quotes a verse to make someone feel good and just kind of goes on through that. But what the Lord saw, and he saw that passion in you, he's like, okay, he's going deeper. We're going to come through this and do something different. And I just thought that was cool, because even, you might have think that, well, I just dropped off the wayside and then just got built back up. Like, it was just really getting rid of stuff sometimes that doesn't need to be there when we go through that stuff.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
What actually, like, Sarah, what encouragement you would offer to someone in your situation? Like, what got you through? Because that was a long time to wait and struggle.
That's a loaded question. Gabriel's family actually I was raised Southern Baptist. My mom was Sunday school teacher. My dad was. I started playing softball, got really good, and did travel ball. And so we just kind of, we didn't go to church. So always had a foundation of who the Lord was. I really didn't know him. So his sister, actually, that's part of the anger, invited me to go to this Pentecostal women's conference. Never been around anything like that. Literally scared me to death. People speaking in tongues and running around, their shofars, and the Southern Baptist girl that's sitting there scared to death. But Jesus literally came and wrecked me. And when I say that, I mean just collision. And I won't ever forget it. I came back. We pulled into Walmart. Gabriel met me to see me. Hadn't seen me in a couple of days. And I was like, Jesus, it's all about Jesus. And I remember breaking some of my CDs because, back then, you got to, you got to shift your whole world here. I can't listen to, secular music. So, and Gabriel told me, he looked at me, he says, you'll never make it. He said, you'll never do it. And then I looked at him and I thought, you have never experienced what I had. And then after that, it was literally a love affair with Jesus. I would sit in my room, like my mom was like, who are you talking to? All I can say is it was the love of God, truly. I had already experienced it. So anything negative Gabriel would say, it would propel me more to the love of God. That's all I know to say. He was always real to me. So Gabriel was always the idiot to me. He would, we'd talk about the Lord or something, and he literally would debate me to make me unbelieve. That was his aim. I would say something about the Lord loves you or something, and he would give me, oh, Lord, encyclopedia knowledge, and I'm like, this guy's an idiot. He does, and I look at him, you don't get it. So it was hard. I wanted to walk away. I was going to talk to some friends. And the Lord spoke to me very clear and told me to stay. And then I grew angry at the Lord for a while because I had to stay. And I sacrificed everything I thought was my dreams, what I wanted to do, in order to stay. But that was probably the roughest time. So he was like, yes, you're staying. But for the first time in my life, I was very angry because God told me to stay. And I thought I'd deserve better. I thought it would hold me down. But in actuality, it really didn't. Gabriel's negativity and him, because I really was in the clouds. I was one of those spiritual people that, I was a seer, and I was seeing all this stuff in the spirit, and I was dreaming, but I had no foundation. So he would question what I believed, but the Lord really would reroute it, and then I would really gain foundation. I questioned myself at that time, and it was bad, but looking back now, the Lord really taught us at the same time on different levels. So I don't really know how to answer that. It was just, it was simply that I knew Jesus was real, and no matter what anyone said or how it made me feel, I knew better. I knew down deep in me that he was there and he was present. Just like Mark said, you would be around Gabriel, and you could feel the Lord in him, and you could feel what he was doing, and and his pain was because he really was loving. And I don't know. I just held on. I really don't know how. I just did. It was really the grace of the Lord, but I don't know if that made sense or if I answered that very well, but that's all I really know what to say.
Something. One thing she did, and she didn't know it at the time. Maybe she did. I didn't know it at the time. She scattered a bunch of seed. She introduced me to people who didn't have the answers, but knew the answer. And God, that's Christianese. I can't believe it. They had life inside themselves, right? And I got to know people who, when I first met them, I couldn't stand them. But honestly, people who genuinely loved me for reasons beyond, because I did not reciprocate that feeling, and I did not pretend to, but they continued to do it anyway. And eventually something took root. It wasn't too long ago. I was sitting and I was kind of feeling bad. I felt like I should be further along to places. Spiritually, I'm like, man, I could be doing better than this, whatever. And I remember getting revelations that I hate to say God told me something. That's part of my old life that I still have to kind of work through. And Sarah says, you need to say that. But honestly, we were at a prayer group, and I had my eyes closed, and I felt God telling me, a seed must grow down before it can grow up. And I think there was a lot of years where that seed inside of me was growing down, taking root, and you couldn't see anything. There was no fruit at that time, right? But I think so much of what she did back then, people she introduced me to, things she introduced me to as far as sides of the Spirit and that I did not want to see, that actually did take root beyond my own consent. So that, I don't know if that helps anybody. I don't know if anybody can, but she did it in a good way. Eventually, for a while she dragged me and we fought, but eventually she did just let me be. But she would invite people to the house and they would just be friends with me. We'd sit around and play poker or talk or, just shoot the bull with each other. And eventually something did take root in me. And to this day, these are lifelong friends of mine. So that's one thing she did. She introduced me to people who were genuinely happy because I was so miserable. And I don't know if she did it on purpose or if it was just a spur of the moment thing, but looking back on it, only a fool could not see the difference between their happiness and my misery. Eventually I did notice that. So that's one thing she did.
So one of the things that I heard you not say, but I heard you say, is it was more important for you to love him than to change him. And like your priority was not changing him, but loving him. And I think one of the things, like when we disagree, like I'm so focused on changing your thought to my thought that becomes paramount. And now I can devalue you because I'm after your thought. And so that's what I heard. You never stopped loving him.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was good. That's what I wanted to say, but yeah.
Nailed it.
In the beginning, I would manipulate him. Now that I look back, I didn't mean to. It wasn't in my heart. But now looking back, I would, before we went somewhere, I'd like, for a couple of days, this is what you're going to experience. Or I would go ahead and like explain how everybody was and his vocabulary to make him feel like I wanted to go ahead and set it up. So he would automatically like it so that he would engage because he had so many walls. But looking back, that was manipulation. I didn't let him experience the way he should have just experienced it, and I didn't let him. And I had to really learn how to just love him and not try to change him because that was so hard. So that was a whole process. And now just letting him, even recently coming to SOS, I was cringing because I knew Mark was going to press buttons. I knew it. But I just had to let him experience it. I didn't say anything, and
It was great.
it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the ironic thing is we actually know somebody at our local church, a girl and a guy who's remarkably similar to our situation.
Yeah.
And we don't know what to tell them because the reward is great, but man, it was hell for a lot of years. And I honestly, I haven't had the chance to meet this guy because he won't come anywhere. I know the guy, I know what that feels like. And right. And part of the thing is a lot of people are saying, are you sure you want to, because they're not married or anything, but they've been dating for a long time. They're talking about marriage. And honestly, I don't know what to say. I know what to say to him as a person, but as a couple, I'm like, it's not my choice anyway. But if they asked me, do I think they should be together or if I think they should go their separate ways, I'd have to pray hard about that. Because us now, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, but us then, whew, she really threw a softball. It was bad for long. The way we were best friends with everything else, but when it came to the most important things in both of our lives, we could not be pulling in different directions harder, And so asking how to encourage people, I honestly don't know. We're in a situation where we're supposed to be encouraging people, and I keep asking this girl to bring this guy. I'm like, please bring him, because I know what he's going through, and I had to like coach her. I had to tell her, I'm like, all right, here's what you're doing wrong, because you don't understand. Like, if this guy shows up, he made an effort, right? It doesn't matter if he sits in it. He doesn't matter if he says anything. It doesn't matter if he opens his mouth. If he sits in a chair, he made an effort, and appreciate that effort, right? And another thing is, don't tell him how good I am. Don't tell him how good anybody else is, because we're guys and we're competitive by nature. And when she tells me that you walk on water, I think, that son of a, right? Because let's be honest, I don't want no man to please my wife in a way I can't, right? I don't want it. I want to be the all in all to her. And if she tells me that somebody else pushes the button that I can't push, I get mad at him. And I automatically have walls up towards this guy.
Could bring you life
Now he's an enemy to me, right? And I can tell you, Randy was one of those guys for me. I had to apologize to Randy a while back because I did not like this man. I never met him, but I didn't like him. I did not like him because Sarah told me how important he was and all the things he experienced. And every time she told me, it made me more angry and more angry at this guy because it felt like infidelity to me in a way, right? Obviously, it wasn't physical, but in a spiritual sense, he was giving her something that I couldn't give her. And that frustrated me. That made me angry. So I had to tell this girl who's saying, I'm saying, look, invite him to come. Don't talk me up. Don't say anything, because that's going to be a point of contention between us at some point, right? And so I have to tell him, don't force a square peg into a round hole. If he comes and he's polite, that's great. Don't make him text me every other day. Don't make him message me and get my phone number. Don't make him do things he doesn't want to do. Don't make him put me in the close friend box before he's ready, because that's not going to be good. Then he's going to feel like this is an obligation. He's going to feel like, man, why do I have to do this? If we were really friends, it would come natural. You wouldn't have to tell me to text this dude, you know? Because I know what that's like. I've been there. So I'm like having to coach this girl and tell her, all right, here's what not to do. Here's what not to do. You know, give the guy a break. If he shows up, see it for what it is. See it for him making an effort, because I guarantee you he does not want to be here. And if he sits there and grits his teeth the whole time, if he bites his tongue and is respectful, then pat that man on the back, because he did a great job today. He really did. You know, because I know what it's like to be so frustrated. See, I will go to these things with Sarah. She would drag me along, and she knew I didn't want to go, but I knew she wanted me to go, so I would go. And I would go, and I'd be so polite, and I'd say yes, and I'd say please, and I'd say thank you, and I'd sit there, and they'd be praying and all this stuff, and I'd just sit in the corner quietly. And then she would say, well, what's wrong with you? Why you just sitting in the corner? Why ain't you talking to anybody? And I'd be so frustrated. I'd be like, what do you want from me, woman? It's not fair. I'm here. I showed up. I did what you wanted me. I was very polite. I did not tell them they were all lunatics, that they all were smoking something I hadn't passed to me yet. Like, I didn't tell them these things. You know what I mean? I was very polite. And it felt so unfair that I had to bow down to her beliefs in order to, you know, be part of that life. To me, at that moment, felt so unfair to me that, like, I'm sacrificing. I'm trying here, you know? So, yeah, so now I'm in a position where when I see that in other people, like, this guy I have, man, and this other guy that I told you I had to talk to, he's very similar in that sense too. Like, he's like, you know, he's very hesitant about coming. And ever since I told him what I'm telling you now, and I'm like, look, I really appreciate it, because I know I didn't want to go to these things. He's my best friend. He won't leave my side. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying that when somebody knows what you're going through, it helps so much. It helps so much, you know? And so, I don't know. I guess that's it. I don't really know where I was going with that, other than the fact that you're asking how to encourage her, and I'm like, I don't know how to encourage her. All I can tell you is, good luck.
You told us a whole lot before that.
Okay.
Yeah. Somebody else?
Something about when you were telling her, like, if he comes, let him experience it, like, for himself. And it almost kind of takes the responsibility off of the person trying to talk up a relationship, out of feeling disappointed, like they didn't do something right. And I know for me, like, I used to, like, love going to concerts, and in my group of friends, I was kind of the only one that really, like, had a relationship with the Lord. And so whenever my friends would say yes to coming to, like, a festival, a Christian festival, I'd be like, oh my gosh, yes, this is what you're going to experience. And then I would watch them. I would sit there and observe them. If I didn't get the reaction that I know I had from my encounter, then I was like, I was disappointed, because then they wouldn't want to come back. I'd be so worried that they didn't want to come back. But if I just, like, it wasn't organic. It wasn't an organic encounter with where they were already at. And I was completely overlooking that. And although my intentions were good, where I was at was not where they were. And whenever I, like, stopped just talking up the event and what happened with me, and just simply opened, like, I kept the invitation open. I never closed it, even if they rejected it. And it allowed them to come and experience whatever they want to experience. And we ended up having conversation that probably wouldn't have happened if I kept forcing it.
Hello? Oh, yeah, I would agree with you. And I would say, look, if you lead a horse to water, don't dunk his head in there, right? Like, don't splash water in his face. Like, if he goes to the riverbank, if he's stubborn enough not to drink, let him be thirsty. That is a very powerful motivator to come back.
I was thinking about earlier when you were talking about pain, and I have encountered recently in a few people that pain is a tremendous deceiver. I actually think it's probably the greatest deceiver that exists in people's lives. When people feel rejected, when people feel lied to, when people feel disillusioned and disappointment because of what someone said they would do and then didn't do. And that can be real or imagined. I know a lot of people going through pain as a result of what they imagined, not even what was actually real. It doesn't matter, because that pain is as real as if someone shot them with a gun. And as you were talking earlier about the pain and how that pain was actually deceiving you for a long time from the reality of how good God really is, you know, I think idolizing the pain is what keeps us longer in the struggle or in the process than necessary. When we think, and not even we think, because sometimes it has nothing to do with rational thought. It really has to do with, I feel pain. And if I feel pain, it is real. And if it is real, and usually if someone feels pain, someone else did it to them. You know, in your case, it was actually like, I think probably for a while you would have blamed God for your pain. Yeah. In other cases, it's someone that, and oftentimes people experience pain from someone they've really given their lives to. Someone they've opened their heart to. Someone they loved deeply. It could have been a parent. It could have been a spiritual leader. It could have been a husband or a wife. Could have, now that I'm a parent, I'm realizing it could be a child. And when that person doesn't meet an expectation, or worse, just flat out rejects, there is pain associated with that. And what I'm discovering, and I said all that to say this, you can't talk people out of their pain. And what Sarah said earlier, and needed Aaron to kind of remind her of what she actually walked. She just simply walked in love with you. She didn't try to convince you that your pain was irrational or unnecessary, or you've been in that long enough, haven't you? You know, I'm sure you felt that sometimes, Sarah. I'm sure every person in this room has walked with someone where you're like, all right, enough's enough. All right. Love does that for people. Love knows when to say and what to say. You know, and I have found that when I'm truly walking in love with somebody, there are moments where I can talk very direct with them. And I can say, but there's often times where I'm not walking in love and I've said something direct and it's actually driven them down further the rabbit hole. But when I'm walking in love and they know it, like Sarah was walking in love with you. And because of that, I'm sure, and I'm not saying you would have changed anything, or I'm not suggesting you should have, but I'm sure because you knew that this woman loved you, if she would have said something direct to you, I think you would have heard it. I'm not sure it would have changed anything, but you would have heard it, you would have received it, because you know she loves you. So I want to say this to all of us, because I think this is one of the main points I wanted to make sure got across tonight, and it did beautifully, is that, you know, whether it's you or whether it's someone you love that you're walking with, I want us to recognize that pain is in my mind right now, what I'm experiencing in people's lives, is the greatest deceiver I've ever experienced. Not lying. Lying uses pain to convince us of things that aren't true. It does. The liar, whatever you want to call it. And you know, I like right now I can even look around the room and I can tell you of certain people that I know about you and in your life that because of what they've experienced, whether as a child or whether some point in time in their life, or maybe even in your relationship, the misconstruing or of the misunderstanding or even the flat out, yes, I did this and it shouldn't have happened, but that pain now is creating a gulf or a wall between them and the Lord. And I do not know of anyone, flesh and blood, that can talk someone out of their own pain. Only the Lord can. And our love is what makes way for the voice of the Lord. And I want to say that, and I want to leave us with that thought tonight, that it's really the love of God that brought transformation to you. If you think about the relationships that started to come into your life, the motivating factor of every one of those relationships was they loved you for who you were. No one wanted you to change. I mean, we wanted you to change, but we weren't trying to make you change. We just loved you for where you were and who you are. And that allowed you to see an elephant, right? Yeah, you were able to touch an elephant, and before long, you were able to hear her words in a way you didn't hear them before. Her love created that opportunity. So for all of us, whether it's you personally or if it's someone in your life, it could be your spouse, it could be your child, it could be your mom or dad, it could be a good friend, loving them. I had a conversation with someone today. And did you ever get like a stubborn streak in you where you're just, you know you love them and you know the right thing for them, and they are trying to talk you out of everything that you're loving them with and being for them in their life. And after 55 minutes of having this, like I watched this person just run around in circles trying to tell me that I didn't understand, trying to tell me that I wasn't getting it, trying to tell me where I got it wrong. And then all of a sudden, I just stood there. I stood there with my heart directed toward them in love, and they just looked at me and said, "Oh, yeah, I see it." It was, honestly, it was the most beautiful hour I've had in a long time. It was painful, though, because for 55 minutes, this guy was just like, it was rough. But it was worth it for the last 5. Because in the last 5, the guy just looked at me, "Oh." I didn't have to say anything. I said the first couple minutes, I was a little frustrated, I'll be honest with you. I was pretty direct with him right in the beginning, and I said some things that were really strong and really direct right in the beginning. And that's when he got really mad, but I liked it. Because when someone gets mad, things starts getting stirred up. Like, I'm not afraid of people being angry anymore. I'm not afraid of people being upset. I'm not afraid of people being frustrated and their emotions getting high, because that's when the good stuff starts to get stirred up. Don't be, I've said this so many times to us all, and we're going to keep talking, but don't be distracted by what first comes out of a person. It's everything underneath starting to rise up. Let them vent. Let them say things about you, to you, or whatever that you know are wrong or know are out of order. Let that come, because what's coming next is so good. And it's who they really are. And what's really happening, this is going to sound kind of gross, but they're getting the crusties out of their eyes that have been closed for a really long time because of a slumbering stupor. And when they open and they start to rub them away, they start to see clearly. But anybody ever try to get those things out of your eyes when it hurts? Like, I've pulled eyelashes out of my eye trying to get rid of them. And that's painful. And I watched this guy go through that. So please, love people in the midst of their pain, and recognize that that pain is blinding people. And I'm walking with a guy who really, in my opinion, I think Aaron and what Sarah said is so appropriate. You were loved into a place where you could see a little more clearly, and you're still doing it. And what I love, and the testimony that I love from lunch the other morning, is that people are being drawn to that same love now. You're loving people with that exact love. I love it. Any other thoughts before we close up? Ben, you want to say anything? Oh, yeah.
First of all, I'd like to just be grateful to God and to Mark, who I look at as my shepherd, and Gabriel. The different things that you said that I could so relate to. I wrote a bunch of things down here, and I want to go over them really quick with you. Struggling. Major struggle, your identity. Keeping hidden is death. Stagnant. I'm not the only one. That really hit me. Cannot be healthy and hidden at the same time. Darkness does not defy us. Don't let circumstances define me. One thing I learned in AA, I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. And one thing I heard over and over was keep coming back. Keep coming back. And I've been coming back. Blindly, I feel the love. I've been told I'm loved. And I keep coming back. Something that really, really hit me was the seed, the root, and the flowers. I know the seed is there within me, and I know the roots are there. I'm desperate for the flowers. Idealizing the pain keeps us where we are. A lot of pain in my life. A lot of pain. And pain is the greatest deceiver. And then the last one that really give me hope, because a caterpillar can become a butterfly. I mean, it really made sense to me. I'm looking for all these different things that I can relate to, like looking over the 62 years of my life, and it's a puzzle, and there's pieces missing, and there's pieces that are not where they need to be. And I want them to be where they need to be. I want the puzzle to be perfect. Just thank you so much for sharing. I just feel like, I don't know about anybody else, but I just feel like you were sitting there and I was on the other side of that table that you were talking about. You were talking directly into me. And you gave me so much hope. Thank you.
Thank you for saying that, because one of my biggest things is this feeling that but my story is somehow specific to me and nobody else can relate to it. So when people tell me that, God, it gives me courage to say it again. Yeah. You know, if there's nobody else in this room, this was worth it to me. So thank you for saying that, because that really helps me want to be able to speak about this stuff. So thank you.
Amen. Hey, thanks for being with us tonight. And I know it's very different than we have done it sometimes, but Gabriel, thank you. Thank you for opening yourself up. And I just want you to know, man, just from the bottom of my heart, I want you to know how much I love you. And I want to tell you this is only the first time of many times where you're going to share with people. So thank you for doing it tonight, somewhat unprepared, somewhat off the cuff, but it was amazing the things that came out of your heart tonight.
Thank you so much.
And you're a great communicator of your heart. And I'm really thankful you're not just giving us your head anymore.
Yeah,
you know?
me too.
Yeah, it feels good to give your heart, doesn't it?
That was amazing.
Yeah. So keep doing that. It'll bring a lot of life to a lot of people. Thank you. I love you guys.